Northern Territory working together. Our ancestors lived all over this country, moving around for ceremony, hunting, and responsibility to our law. This law was given to us in the time we call word, sometimes called the dreaming or dreamtime. It was in this time that the word was made. We can only talk about some of the travels of the creation beings and how they made this country. The small hills along the road near Nitmiluk is named after Bema, the frill-necked lizard who came from Mumbaranga tribal country, then travelled north. Along the rainbow serpent is associated with the deep green blue of the second gorge and must not be spoken to or disturbed. Bolong is seen not only as an important giver of life, but may also be seen as a destroyer and must be respected. When white people came into our land, they came to run with cattle, digging up country, looking for gold and tin. Jawoyn lives were forever changed, but we continue to live according to Jawoyn tribal law in the traditions of our ancestors. In the 1970s, new government law meant that the Jawoyn could apply to have their land returned under the Land Rights Act. We fought long and hard for the control of our country.
Can we ask you how you feel about the Jawoyn land claim on the gorge and the possibility of
You're a hypocrite.
Why?
Why?
Yes.
They got no right to it.
We've lost Ezra, we've lost Kakadu, and here goes Katherine Gorge, presumably. No, it's not on.
Many people have worried that the Jawoyn were trying to take the gorge away. I don't know where we were supposed to take it.
Until finally, in 1989, the country came back.
In the Northern Territory, federal, state and Aboriginal leaders have witnessed the return of one of Australia's most popular tourist draw cards to its traditional owners. Majestic Katherine Gorge is now part of a national park with a new name.
Preparations for today's historic handover began early this morning. The mood was relaxed and jubilant despite a noticeable absence of white folk from Katherine, a town until recently bitterly divided over the gorge claim launched more than a decade ago.
It's sometimes said that the Northern Territory government is not responsive or sympathetic to the needs and hopes of Aboriginal people. This agreement demonstrates the very opposite. It demonstrates to the rest of Australia what most Territorians already know. The Northern Territory government can, and Aboriginal owners in the Territory can and do work together. It shows that we are willing to cooperate to reach agreements that meet each other's needs and the needs of the community at large. Ladies and gentlemen, today's agreement is an important agreement. It is an historic agreement. And most of all, it's a good agreement. It will work and it will work well. Today is not just a happy ending, it's a happy new beginning. Thank you.
Today's handover is a watershed for Australia's black-white relations, a public recognition of the Jawoyn people's links to their lands and a guarantee that their traditions will be maintained. As a start, the gorge was today renamed Nitmiluk National Park, Aboriginal for singing cicadas.
Katherine Gorge National Park became Nitmiluk, and the Jawoyn people had a new way of looking after country. Board of Management has a majority of Jawoyn membership and meets regularly to oversee the park's activity and directions. Our aim now is to maintain the culture and the natural beauty of our land while providing work for our people. The canoe hire and the boat cruise franchise in Nitmiluk National Park is 100% owned by Nitmiluk Tours, which is an enterprise owned by Jawoyn Association. While the plan of management have the policy of employing Aboriginal rangers in the park, their income from businesses in the parks means the Jawoyn Association can build a secure future and social services throughout our community. Fire management. Another tradition which continues in the park, the Jawoyn are working with Parks and Wildlife Commission to prevent large fires from destroying country. Nitmiluk National Park is more than a gorge. It's a special kind of country that has to be managed right, so it can always be here for all to share.
Okay, on our way down to the boat tour. This place is incredible. Reminds me loads of Uluru. Yeah, really good, thanks.
Home of the Jawoyn people. My name's Landon and I'm going to be taking you up the river here this morning. Now, just in case you are unsure, you have found yourself on a 2-hour, 2-gorge cruise. What this means is we're going to be jumping onto 2 separate boats. So we'll head up the first gorge as far as we can before we're stopped by a natural occurring rock bar. We'll then do about a 500-600 metre walk into the second gorge, where we'll jump onto a second boat. Now on that walk, there's about 70 odd steps spread throughout it. We do also pass some Jawoyn rock art. If you didn't want to do that walk, you are more than welcome to set up camp at the top of the first gorge. We're going to be in the second gorge for about 40 minutes or so. So we'll head up the second gorge as far as we can before we're once stopped. We'll then turn around and make the same path back downstream. So we should be back here at the main jetty by about 11 a.m. This on the left and right hand side of us. They mark the entrance to our 13 gorge system and entire Arnhem Land Plateau, which is essentially just a very large block of sandstone that stretches for over 500 kilometres and half that width. And the gorge here is just a crack that runs through that sandstone block. And that sandstone block, it does run up into Katherine National Park and Western Arnhem Land, which do have a lot of amazing places. If you're into your waterfalls and you're swimming, they have the Jim Jim and Maguk Falls. If you're into your rock art, there's the Ube and Norangi or Norangi rock art shelters. A lot of amazing paintings there. And then if you are into your crocodiles and your wildlife, the fan favourite is the Kowinda Yellow Water Cruise. You'll find a lot of saltwater crocodiles as well as a lot of bird life. If you want to see those crocodiles for free though, there is the notorious Cave Hills Crossing, located in the East Alligator River. So just again, that's up in Katherine National Park. Now here in the Northern Territory, we have 2 seasons. This being the wet season and the dry season. We're currently in our dry season, and in this season, the average river height will sit at about 7 metres deep. Now in the wet season, we'll have about 1,000 mil of rain that drops. And that's what causes the river to rise. So the river will double and sit at about 14 metres roughly, just depending how good or bad our wet season is. Now Though it is a non-tidal river, it's all rain-fed. And the way it rises each year is up in the Arnhem Land Plateau is our catchment for the river, a place called Birdie Creek. Now if you imagine a bowl running under a tap, that bowl is going to fill all the way up and then eventually spill out. So that's what happens at Birdie Creek. It fills all the way up and then it spills out, flooding all the rivers and creeks surrounding the area. This river, it does start up in the Arnhem Land Plateau, then makes its way down here to the gorge. It will then run another 30 kilometres down to the township of Katherine, another 70 kilometres from there down to the Flora River, which eventually runs into the Daly River, and then it exits out at a place called Anson Bay at the Timor Sea, which is located about 160 kilometres southwest of Darwin. And so if you were to look at this entire river from a bird's eye view or on a map, it does make a funny looking horseshoe shape inland back to the ocean. Now I mentioned in the territory we identify 2 seasons. The Jawoyn people, they identify 5 different seasons. January to February, they know it as Geog. That's all our monsoonal rains. March, April to May, they know it as Bungadum. That's all the knock 'em down rains, so it pushes all the long spear grass over. June to August, they know it as Marlapa. This is the cold weather season. September, October, they know it as Jungle. This is the build-up season when it gets the local Aboriginal people that have occupied those areas for many thousands of years. Katherine, that's the meeting place of 3 separate Aboriginal groups. This being the Jawoyn people, the Dugamin people, and the Wannerman people. This side of town, it is considered to be Jawoyn land. Jawoyn, it's like saying Darwin, but with a J, and it's spelt Jawoyn, Jawoyn. The actual township of Katherine, now that's Dugamin land, that's my country. And then the west side of Katherine, that's Wannerman land. So the Jawoyn name for this river that we're travelling on today, they know it as the Badia River. It's named after the blue-winged kookaburra, Badia. Nitmiluk, that's the name for the whole national park, as it is just a little easier for everyone to know the area as. For the Jawoyn people, Nitmiluk's only the name for the first gorge here. It is 2 Jawoyn words joined into one, Nitmi being the song of the cicada, and Luk meaning place, place of, or country. So Nitmiluk, place of the song of the cicada, or to keep it short, cicada country. They move very fast, and especially living by the water's edge. The cattle, they would go 3 to 5 days without any water. One thirsty cow can drink a lot of water. So by the time the herds reach these water holes, they drink the entire thing dry, which cut off a lot of the food supply for the Jawoyn. But when the Jawoyn saw the cattle standing there, staring at them, not running away like a wallaby does, they thought it was quite amazing, because one cow has enough food to feed enough mouths. The Jawoyn folk back in those days, they had no sense of ownership. Like, a man probably owned a spear, a woman maybe a digging stick, that was about it. They all had to share to be able to survive. They believed everything belonged to the land, and so did they. So they took what they needed, and nothing more. The settlers, they started noticing their cattle numbers dropping, and they thought the Jawoyn were stealing their cattle. So they started to do some nasty things. And obviously people back in those days, they weren't the nicest. The Jawoyn, they didn't know why this was happening to them, and so they did retaliate. This is when people started getting speared and stuff. But, you know, obviously not doing too well against things like guns and horses. Now the settlers, they then popped the Jawoyn onto cattle properties to work for really unfair payment, really unfair treatment. This is where we fast forward a few years. It was an extremely dark time for the people in the bush, but this is where we come into our age lapse. Now, some of you might be familiar with the Great Wave Hill Walk-Off. In 1966, the Gurindji people on Wave Hill Station left in protest for fair payment, fair treatment, and native land title. And that was led by a man named Vincent Lingiari. And there's also the song by Paul Kelly, From Little Things, Big Things Grow. And that was also about that land claim. The Gurindji people on Wave Hill Station, they sort of inspired a land claim across the nation. And so shortly after the Gurindji, you have the people from Uluru or Ayers Rock. And then in 1978, that was when the Jawoyn applied for their first land claim. However, it got knocked back for 11 years because the government were running tours throughout the park at the time. And they thought if they were to give the land back, Jawoyn were to close it off and stop being that they legally owned all the land. But this is where they ran into another issue, because they didn't want to stop running the place as a national park. And in Australia, you can't run a national park on privately owned land. So they leased the land back to the government on a 99-year perpetual lease. And that took the association about 5 years or so to save enough money to buy out the existing tour company that were running tours throughout the park at the time. And that company, they were known as Travel North. So this means that all the boats you find today, campground, visitor centre, it's all 100% Jawoyn owned. It is a non-for-profit organisation, so all the money that gets made within the park does go back into it. So there'll always be money aside for the Jawoyn families and kids that need help with going away for things like school, sports, housing, all of that little stuff. Now the Jawoyn Association, they work with Parks and Wildlife to maintain the national park. This includes things like fire management, so all the burning of country, which they've been doing for a few months now. They do feral animal management, so taking care of all the buffaloes, pigs and donkeys. And then a very important one is the crocodile management. Here in the Northern Territory and all over the top end, there are two species of crocodiles. We have the small, shy one, the freshwater crocodile, which is also known as the River Johnson crocodile. And the Jawoyn here, they know that one as Goyama. You then also get the larger, scarier one, the saltwater crocodile, which is also known as the estuarine crocodile. And the Jawoyn, they know that one as Ginga. So Ginga, saltwater crocodile, Goyama, freshwater crocodile. The freshwater crocodile, they are endemic to this area, meaning it's their home. So we leave them here in the river all year round. Saltwater crocodiles though, they're not endemic. They're also a very dangerous animal, so it's very important that we remove them from our gorge. In the dry season, there's a lot of rock bars that separate the river. Crocodiles, they have a soft underbelly, and they don't really like to climb over all those rocks. So we're pretty safe from them in the dry season. But in the wet season, when the river rises over those rocks, it essentially becomes a crocodile highway. The female saltwater crocodile, they nest in our wet season, which is from November to April. But they prefer a more swampy wetland area, like a billabong, as they make their nests on top of the water out of things like sticks, leaves and grass. And so if they were to make their nests here, the river would just wash them away. So it's not their ideal place. They come through looking for a place to nest, see it's no good, and they'll make their way out. The male saltwater crocodiles, they come through looking for the females. They'll stay a few days, see there's no women around, and then make their way out as well. However, because the river can rise and fall very suddenly, very quickly, sometimes these crocodiles get trapped. And this is where Parks and Wildlife come into play. They do a 6-week survey on the river. This includes coming out at night with a spotlight and looking for the eye shine of these crocs. They'll do low helicopter flyovers because it's easier to spot them from above. They'll set their crocodile traps, which we passed coming up the river. I'll talk about that later on. And then also crocodile indicators. So all those little red floats you might have seen on the sides of the river as we made our way out, they're crocodile indicators. Crocs are a very curious animal. They go up to those floats, take a big chunk of it. If you still can't tell the difference between a freshwater croc and a saltwater croc, you just jump in the river. And if it swims towards you, it's a saltwater crocodile. As you can see though, we are coming to the end of the first gorge here, so I will be parking this boat up in a second. Just as we go into that mooring point, I will ask you just to remain seated, expect a bump. If I get it wrong, expect a bang. Aboriginal culture. I'll need more than a 2-hour cruise to explain it fully, but I'll explain it to the best that I can and keep it very simple. Now, moieties. It's an anthropological word meaning division of two. So yin and yang, they're moieties. In this part of Australia, instead of calling it yin and yang, we know it as dua and yiraja. Now, within these two moieties, there are 16 in total skin names. 8 skin names in Dua, 8 skin names in Yiraja. Now, a skin name, it's got nothing to do with your physical appearance, but it is an identity. It ties you to country, it ties you to animals, and it ties you to people. everything in the world for the Jawoyn people is split into these two moieties, either Dua or Yeraja. For example, the white cockatoo, it's got that yellow crest, they're Yeraja. The black cockatoo, it's got those red feathers at the back, Dua. Now moieties is patrilineal, meaning you inherit it. And you inherit it from your father. So your father's moiety, that becomes your moiety. If he's Dua, you're Dua. If he's Yeraja, you're Yeraja. Now, you inherit your skin name from your mother's side. This gives you what's called, so again, you inherit your moiety from your father. Now his country, that also becomes your country. Your mother, you inherit her skin name. And this gives you what's called a Jungai relationship, meaning you have a duty of care to take care of your mother's country and take care of their ceremony. Now your mother and your father are always going to have opposite moieties, and this is to stop inbreeding and keep the bloodline pure. Now, if you share a skin name with someone, you're considered family, and this can be beyond blood. You don't actually have to be related to someone, but if you share a skin name, you're considered family. So for example, I could share a skin name with someone all the way down in New South Wales that I have no clue of. If we share a skin name though, they could either be my brother or they could either be my sister. Pretty much to keep it as basic as I can, your parents will always have opposite moieties. If you share a skin name, you're considered family, and this can be beyond blood. So that movie Jeddah, it's about a young girl named Jeddah. She falls in love with a man named Marbach. Now Jeddah and Marbach, they share a skin name, which considers them family beyond blood. And this is forbidden in the Aboriginal law. Marbach, he goes a bit crazy and he kidnaps Jeddah, takes her on a wild goose chase through the country, and they end up back there at Jeddah's Rock. You won't need to watch that movie to see what happens at the end, but I can tell you that when they sent that film overseas to be done in colour, they had an accident on the plane and they lost all their final scene footage. And they didn't have the budget to come back out and film it again, so they went down to New South Wales, to the Blue Mountains, and they just changed the colour of the backdrop. So if you do watch that movie, you will notice the change of scenery towards the end. Now we have had a few other movies and TV shows filmed here. So what was just in front of us is now going to be over on our right. We have another big split in the rock, another subgorge, and that subgorge, it matches up with the split all the way down to the left where we've just come from. Now you're going to find another split in the rock. If you follow it to the top of the escarpment, you find a bit of a V shape. This is what we know as a partial fracture. It's just a subgorge that hasn't opened up all the way. So left to right, another separate fracture. What we're doing today, what we're doing now is sitting between two separate fractures, and what we're doing today is just travelling through the deepest and the least resistant fractures within that sandstone. Here, the Jawoyn know it as bird, B-U-R-R, bird. And in this creation time, or dream time, there are multiple creational beings and multiple creational periods. But one of the better well-known creational beings is the rainbow serpent. All Aboriginal cultures have different names, different stories, and different serpents. Here, the Jawoyn know it as Bolong, B-O-L-O-N-G, Bolong. Down in Perth, they know it as Woggle. And in my country, we know it as Rodden-Dolly. The story of Bolong and how this place here came to be is that he was from the north, the saltwater people. And he came through here hunting, back when the land was very flat, there were no trees, none of that. Now Bolong was feeling a bit hungry, saw a few birds up ahead of him, so he thought he might sneak up on those birds. However, being such a large serpent, those birds, they saw him coming and they took off. Bolong, he chased after those birds, and whilst doing so, he carved the land in the image of himself. So if you have been paying attention, we have been going up on sort of 90-degree turns, kind of like a snake moving through the land. Now Nitmiluk, he was another creational being. He was a dragon-like being, and he was from the west, at a place called Port Keats or Wadeye. And he came through here hunting. He came through here naming a lot of the places after the things that he found in the area. On Nitmiluk's journey from the west, he had a dilly bag full of water, fire sticks, and spears. Just outside of Katherine, on the way to Jawoyn, on the left-hand side of the road, is a very large area of limestone formation rocks. Nitmiluk, he thought he might camp there for the night, but he couldn't sleep very well. He was being bitten in his sleep. There was also a very irritating buzzing sound in the background, and it was a mosquito. And so he named that area Whirly Whirling Jung, meaning mosquito dreaming. As Nitmiluk made his way to the first gorge, he thought he might camp tonight. But once again, he couldn't sleep very well. He was tossing and turning in his sleep. There was another irritating noise in the background, but this time it was a nit 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 noise, the sound of the cicada. And so he named the first gorge Nitmiluk, meaning cicada country. As Nitmiluk made his way into the second gorge here, there were a lot of birds that wanted the water he was carrying. But you see, Nitmiluk was a very greedy being, and he didn't want to share it with those birds. He had Lumbuk the pigeon, Wak Wak the crow, Badia the blue-winged kookaburra, and Barak the snake-necked darter bird. They all wanted some of this water. So as Nitmiluk made his way through the second gorge, he thought he might name it after that blue-winged kookaburra. And the Jawoyn of the second gorge as Badia, which is also the name for the whole river itself. As Nitmiluk made his way into the third and the fourth gorge, he spooked two Australian snake-necked darter birds, causing them to clash into each other. And so he named the third and fourth gorge Barak after the sound of that collision. Now Nitmiluk, to hide from all of these birds, he hid up in the Arnhem Land Plateau, at a cave that we know as Snowdrop Creek. But little did he know, this was home to another creational being known as Wallach, the cave bat. And so whilst Nitmiluk was sleeping, Wallach speared him in the chest with a stone-tipped spear, killing him, poor Nitmiluk. And whilst doing so, he pierced that dilly bag of water Nitmiluk was carrying. This caused the water to then spill out into the country and fill the gorge here that Bolong had carved out. When Bolong had come back from hunting, he saw what he had created, but he liked that corner we were just in particularly the most. So he dug himself a hole, few tunnels out to Kata caves and Edith Falls, and the Jawoyn believe that this is where Bolong resides till this day. So because of this, the Jawoyn, they don't come to the second gorge here to fish or swim, they won't even touch the water. And it's all in fear of disrespecting or disturbing Bolong. Because being a creational being, he can come back in the form of a destruction being. The form of fires, earthquakes, lightning storms, all that sort of stuff. As I did mention earlier, we opened the second gorge for canoeing and swimming. The Jawoyn though, they know that everyone has their own cultures and their own beliefs. So they don't mind people coming through here. Really, they just don't come through themselves. Because the Jawoyn stories, the Jawoyn beliefs, are only meant for the Jawoyn people. So that's the Dreamtime story on how this place here came to be. It is kind of like a kid's version of that story. We don't get told the full version because you need to go through a specific initiation ceremony to hear the rest of that. So we only get told the kids version. But if you think about it as well, back in those days, you couldn't write books to tell stories. It was all passed down verbally and through paintings. That story would be well over 10,000 years old, and you're lucky enough to hear it tonight, so I do think that's pretty cool. This section coming up over on the right, we know it as our hanging gardens or our raining rocks. It's quite obvious why I got those names. Some of the plants you can find growing here are a five-fingered fern. There's a native lasiandra that grows a purple flower, and then also a maidenhair fern. Now these plants, they all need a permanent supply of water, and that's located on the top of the escarpment. There's a swamp up there known as Dunlin Swamp, and the water from that swamp seeps through the rock, and it takes about 18 months to filter through and exit out here and a few other places in the gorge. So that water you can find draining out the rock, now we know it as sweet water. It's very clean, it's had that 18 months of filtration.